As Moore's Law continues to make the infrastructure more affordable and performant, folks bias more of their investment to it. So certainly as computing and the infrastructure surrounding it becomes more affordable, the largest companies in the world and some of the smallest companies in the world say, hey, I can now use computing and use infrastructure to go run my business in ways that it required, historically a lot of machines or a lot of people to otherwise go do. So what we're seeing is those like my dentist and the, retailers and shopping malls who use Moore's Law every week or every year to reduce what they have to spend on IT. And then there are the folks, the core network operators, the core R&D spenders, whether they're energy companies or logistics companies or pharmaceutical companies that are beginning to really pound away on building, epic scale data center infrastructure. Why? Not because they want to, but because it actually creates value for them. They can discover drugs more rapidly, discover oil more rapidly, discover portfolio aberrations more rapidly. And when they do that, they create a lot of value.
Well, and that's why, doing black box, the goal was not, what's the cheapest computer you could build. The goal was what's the cheapest computing you can deliver. And that, when you start talking about scale and putting those together and sort of the what's important to people as you scale is really different from the dentist's office, which is sort of the cost of acquisition and where did this tuck under a desk, to, how much power does it consume in space and what's my agility and be able to deploy it.
And I think the whole introduction of black box has now driven people to start thinking about what's the unit of work involved in doing computing. It's not a computer. It's management and it's software stack and it's data management and it's security and now it's physical location.
Storage and yes, exactly. Cooling and power distribution.
And I would add to that long-term sustainability. Yeah. Just that at some point all the resources we had considered infinite, whether it was power or cooling or space, aren't so infinite anymore. And obviously you have some things going on in the labs and across the company to go drive that sense of responsibility.
Yeah, well, certainly with black box, we do view it as cradle to cradle. So we will take it all back. We have actually an excellent record at Sun of taking equipment and doing less than 5% of what we take back ends up in a waste stream. So we really do look at that whole cycle, and particularly it's important as these things have very short shelf lives in terms of capital equipment. I think that is unique to this industry.
Well, and I think one of my favorite things that Dave Douglas, who's the VP of Eco-Responsibility among a number of other titles at Sun, one of the favorite things that he says is eco-responsibility is an interesting term, but the eco and eco-responsibility can also mean economics. And so why are we so efficient about what ends up in the waste stream? Because if there's waste involved, that means that's just you got to write it off. If there's not waste involved, you can recover the assets, and that not only makes Sun a lot more efficient, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of our customers are beginning to look at it in the same way. If I don't have to waste space, if I don't have to waste heat, if I don't have to waste power, that saves me money, and by the way, that lowers my profile in the marketplace in a number of other ways.
Says green is the new green.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that this certainly ties into a number of themes we're hearing in the market right now, whether it's thinking about the efficiencies of computing and in some cases about the ubiquity of computing. And it's certainly, I say, one of the trade press's favorite words. I like to think of it as transparency, that people are computing or they're benefiting from computing in ways that they don't explicitly think of as computing. So you talked about thinking about high-performance compute as a way of driving drug discovery. Well, that is going to improve my health care costs. It's going to improve my health. The computing is indirectly impacting me. So in addition to talking about our R&D investment, we also like to talk about the digital divide. And people always think of it in economic terms. But do you think there's a digital divide in terms of information technology terms? People who have information, people who don't.
Well, I think
is that where we're driving?
Well, just to understand our business model, it's pretty basic. The more people come online in the world, two things happen in my view. One is there's more infrastructure required to service them, which is a good thing. And the second thing is the more transparent the market becomes, and in the long term, the more stable that market becomes. Because the more transparent the markets are, in the long term, the more efficient they are, and frankly, the more stable society becomes when more folks can actually see what's going on in the world. So I think bridging the digital divide is another one of those things, like the network is the computer, that it allows us to focus in ways. Look, there's a digital divide in a data center between pools of storage and pools of computing. How can we bridge that? Well, more efficient network infrastructure and more efficient data center infrastructure. So I think there's certainly a variety of digital divides we have to go pursue. There's both a social divide as well as an economic divide, and we're obviously going to put our R&D and our technology investments into bridging them both.
And just to tie that back, I mean, it is Innovation is going to matter a lot in doing this. And I don't think people appreciate how much the assumptions that have gone into what makes a computer, important and valuable in the past, how those are different and changing, and how predictable do you think our product stream or R&D is going to be over the next?
But one of the points that I make to the street is you got to understand that at $2 billion a year in R&D, a lot of what we do is going to be relatively unpredictable. No one would have predicted that we would have said, a shipping container is an ideal infrastructure for building large-scale data centers. No one would have predicted that, 4 or 5 years ago, that the power efficiency of Niagara was going to be, one of its key differentiators in operating and in growing a business for us that's, $100 million a quarter. No one would have predicted that open source software would begin to revolutionize the storage marketplace, or that you'd put 24 terabytes in a server and say that's a new platform. So I think there's a lot of what's going to happen next that no one's going to predict. I would dare to say he's probably not even going to predict it either. And
well, I want to say thank you for the insight into what we're trying to drive and how we're driving our R&D portfolio, and thank Greg and Jonathan for joining us today. Again, I'm Hal Stern, and you've been watching a special video episode of Innovating at Sun.